We have electricity prices 2 or 3 times more than United States and China. If you don't have energy at affordable prices, we don't have anything.
So we set a target. Our policy was to achieve it no matter what. This resulted in unintended consequences, endangered energy security and of skyrocketing prices.
We are in a situation where we in Europe try to dance faster than the music.
Everything was focused on Green Deal, everything was focused on decarbonization.
It's contradictory to try to reduce many million tons of CO2 in Europe while it would be cheaper to reduce outside in the rest of the world.
If you fully decarbonize your electricity with nuclear power, so zero CO2 emissions, you are not compliant with Europe's environmental goals, which is absolutely crazy.
Hello and welcome to the heart of the European Parliament here in Brussels. My name is Bartha and I'm the director of Epicenter, a network of 12 leading free market think tanks from all across Europe. And we're in the midst of European winter as we are recording this conversation. Temperatures across the continent are freezing and electricity and gas consumption in several member states hit an all-time high. So really, there is no better time to talk about energy production and related climate policy matters than now. And to do this, I'm delighted to welcome 3 experts, one from the policymaking side and 2 from the academic and think tank world. So first of all, a very warm welcome to Virgil-Daniel Popescu, MEP, representing the National Liberal Party in Romania in the EPP group. And whilst you're currently in the European Parliament, MEP Popescu was previously the Energy Minister of Romania for 4 years. Also, a very warm welcome to Radu Nechita, who's a professor of economics at the Babeș-Bolyai University in Romania and a research expert for IES Europe, a partner think tank of Epicenter. And last but not least, great to have you, Carlo Stagnaro, with us, who is the Research and Studies Director of Istituto Bruno Leoni, Epicenter's Italian member think tank. Gentlemen, very warm welcome to you all. Great to have you with us. So, MEP Popescu, you very much know that the EU's energy policy was meant to have 3 pillars. It was about energy security, it was about energy affordability, and it was about decarbonization. And I know that politicians usually don't like trade-offs, and neither do the voters. But when it comes to all these 3 pillars, is it possible to emphasize them equally? Or do you think that there should be an order of emphasis, which one we focus first, second, and third?
No, when we talk about energy, we talk about security. So if we have energy, we have everything. If we don't have energy at affordable prices, we don't have anything. If we don't have affordable prices, we don't have competitive industry. So we have to focus on all of 3 simultaneously. If not, we will lose the fight with the prices. And if we lose the fight with the prices, the people will suffer. And we saw that in the crisis, that we already have it. And it was very hard for us to shift from a dependency from Russian gas, to have new sources of supply, and we didn't reach an affordable prices of electricity. We have electricity prices 2 or 3 times more than United States and China. So, and we fight with industry from that countries, let's say fight, but we are on the same market and we have almost same products, but ours are more expensive than the others. So if we don't have this balance, if we don't succeed in this fight, we won't have a competitive industry in Europe, and we have to have it.
So energy security, important. Energy affordability, important. What about decarbonization?
Yes, also decarbonization is important. But not like the previous, let's say, mandate of the Commission. Because on that previous mandate, everything was focused on Green Deal, everything was focused on decarbonization without looking at competitiveness, without looking at energy prices. And yes, the prices were lower, but was lower because we are very dependent on gas, on Russian gas. And from that, in in chain with other dependencies. And we saw that. And I think that the Green Deal was not imposed, but was forced. Was put in place in all countries. And now I think we shifted to competitiveness. And if we look at competitiveness, means better industry, better way of living, better energy security. So I think this is the right way. Yes, decarbonization is good, but we cannot do it on like that. We have to have a transition. Okay, we said 2050, it's net zero, it's a target, but I am against those intermediate targets, let's say 90% in 2040. Why 90%? Why not 80? Why not 70? How do you say 90%? I'm against all targets that are put it on the paper by the bureaucracy from the Commission. That I think we fight here in Parliament in order not to repeat the mistakes that we did it in the past.
So we will return to the issue of decarbonization because indeed during last mandate that has been probably the biggest and most important topic that was discussed. But I'm keen to turn to Carlo and ask the same question about this trilemma. Is it possible to pursue decarbonization, energy security and affordability to equal measure, or should there be an order of priority between the three?
Well, I think that my answer would be pretty much in line with what MEP Popescu has just said. I think that the three goals can be pursued, but you have to understand that sometimes they can come in conflict with each other. And in that case, you have to make choices regarding which the real priority is. Now, I think in addressing these issues in the European Union, we have made one major mistake especially in the past legislature, but maybe even earlier. We picked climate policy and climate decarbonization as a sort of independent variable. So we set a target, and our policy was to achieve it no matter what. And this resulted in unintended consequences. Unintended consequence number one was increasing prices, which created a real problem, a real issue for many European companies and households. But also this, at a certain point, came in conflict with energy security. It is true what you said, what MEP Popescu said, that we had to get rid of Russia as soon as possible. But the real question there is, why did we depend on Russia so much in the first place? There are many reasons. Of course, one of them is that Russian gas was relatively cheap. But another reason was that we basically gave up any alternative source of gas. Particularly, we gave up on producing gas domestically. And the reason why we did this was that we said, we convinced ourselves that we could get rid of gas altogether in a relatively short period of time. And so if you don't need gas, if you believe by 2030 or 2035 you will consume zero gas or almost zero gas, it may be reasonable to just outsource the production of gas to third parties.
But is that a realistic belief?
In the end of the day, this backfired. And this is why we found ourselves in 2021 and 2022 with a crazy situation of over-dependency on Russia, of endangered energy security, and of skyrocketing prices.
So what can we do about the latter when it comes to skyrocketing prices and emphasizing the affordability issue? We already talked about industry and that we are not competitive when it comes to China and Russia because they both have significantly lower prices, both for electricity and gas. What can the EU do when it comes to energy affordability in terms of policy reform?
Well, first we have to understand that we don't have to make a choice like all or nothing. It's not a choice. As an economist, I have to explain always that the choice is not this or that. It is a little bit more of this, a little bit less of that. So we have to find the right balance. and as a tool to guide our decision is the cost-benefit analysis. And maybe now we are in a situation where in the kind of in the pillar of decarbonization, we in Europe try to dance faster than the music. We have to understand that the efforts of decarbonization are increasingly expensive on the way on the decarbonization. And it's contradictory to try to reduce, I don't know how many million tons of CO2 in Europe at a very, very high cost, while the rest of the world is not doing. It would be cheaper to reduce CO2 emissions and other greenhouse gases outside in the rest of the world. And when we look what happens, this policy is not necessarily accepted worldwide. So my advice would be, let's slow down a little bit. The time all the people on this planet will understand, maybe we can go one step in front of other people, like showing the way, because we can afford it. But I shouldn't go that far. I shouldn't go that far because it's very costly, and you cannot compress the cost. Another term would be the security. We don't want to replace the dependence on Russian gas with other dependencies like rare earth or other technologies, even nuclear. Dependency on shady governments everywhere. With nuclear is a little bit more diverse. We could diversify our sources of import because, for example, in Australia there are a lot of reserves for uranium and this kind of thing. So there is a balance. The question is a balance, and security and affordability. Speaking on affordability, we must remind that we overtax alcohol and tobacco because it's not good for people. We want to protect them. But the third target of the excises is energy. Energy is targeted specifically by one of the very few taxes established at the European level. And I think it's contradictory to speak about reducing the price of energy, affordability, and at the same time having excises that are designed to increase the price of energy.
So I would like to stick to the topic of dependencies that you have mentioned, because recently you had a speech in the European Parliament where you said that Russian gas has never been a neutral commercial good. It has been an instrument of pressure, of coercion, and of political blackmail. I very much agree with the statement.
Yeah, that's true.
The big question is, if you don't want to replace Russian gas with other dependencies on other countries, can we have domestic production of certain energy? And I'm thinking, for example, sticking to the topic of natural gas, the shale gas revolution in the United States has massively reduced commercial and consumer prices. Is this something that European policymakers can and should consider?
No, I don't think that shale gas will have future in Europe. We have reserve of gas, like in Romania, we found it in the Black Sea. Bulgaria found it in the Black Sea. Turkey found it in the Black Sea. So Black Sea could be a reservoir, but of new resources of gas. But the shale gas, I think he lost the opportunity 10, 15 years ago when Chevron wanted to come and bring that technology. And at that time, we didn't know the words of hybrid war, because I think that the Russian did a hybrid war on us, on Europe, not to have that technology, to increase the dependency of Russian gas. Because if we all developed it 10, 15 years ago, the shale gas in Europe, we won't have that problem now. We will have other reserves of gas. But I also refer in the European Parliament in my speech not to replace a dependency of Russian gas with dependency of technology like solar panels, like batteries, like inverters from third country. And I think I said China. And I also said I don't want to think what it will happen in 10, 15 years if we don't do anything in order to produce here in Europe these kind of things, when the solar panel has to be changed, when the battery has to be changed, and maybe we won't find it on the market, or we'll find it on the market at other prices.
So what did we do about reducing these dependencies?
We have to produce here, if we want green and we want green energy and cheap energy on solar, on batteries, storage, on microprocessor, on digitalization, we have to have here in Europe and in allied countries those products to produce. This is the reality. This is that we have to do it. And I'm waiting from the European Commission of a proposal of industrial act or something like that in order to have this, to encourage companies to invest in Europe. Till now, I don't see. We invented the solar panel, but we produce it, we give it to the China to produce. And now we import it from there. All the European money goes to China. 80% or 90% of the production is imported from China. This is not going in the right direction. Now it's good, it's okay, but I don't know what will happen.
Carlo, do you agree when it comes to energy production, do we need to do it within the European Union in order to have energy security, or are there ways to diversify?
I think that it really depends on how you get there. We tried to do that in the past few years in a failed and wasteful way. We basically subsidized companies to produce domestically, like batteries or solar panels and other, critical technologies. But in the end of the day, they could not be competitive. There are a few famous cases of which maybe the poster child is the Swedish Northvolt. That used to be our big hope in becoming a European powerhouse for batteries, and it couldn't, make it work. So from that point of view, I think the real challenge is to make the European economy more competitive and more dynamic, and you cannot do that by just throwing subsidies in face of the your favored companies, but you do that by reducing taxes or improving the quality of regulation and by deregulating. I would also add one more thing. One reason, I think we all agree, and we all have agreed in this discussion, that Europe's climate policies have resulted in too high costs, both for the production of energy and for consuming companies, in particular energy-intensive companies and households. One reason for that is that we didn't just set an environmental target of CO2 reduction and created a proper incentive for companies to reduce their own emissions and discover new technologies to do so. We added a number of sub-goals and sub-sub-goals and sub-sub-sub-sub-goals and so on and so forth, such as, reaching a certain amount of renewable energy production and using specific technologies within the renewable world. And we introduced the ban on, we tried to introduce the ban on the internal combustion engine that we are reviewing right now, luckily enough, and many other goals that have little to do with the environment, and they have mostly to do with industrial policy. By doing so, we basically increase the costs. First of all, because when you pick your preferred technologies, you leave out other technologies that may be equally good or maybe even better. For example, the most striking example is nuclear power. If you fully decarbonize your electricity with nuclear power, so zero CO2 emissions, you are not compliant with Europe's environmental goals, which is absolutely crazy if you believe that CO2 is the major threat humanity has to face. And the other, so we basically choose some technologies and leave other technologies aside. And the other big mistake is that you cannot give the same goals to 27 member states, which are widely different within themselves. I mean, look at the 42.5% renewable energy goal that each member state, not the European Union as a whole, but each member state is supposed to reach by 2030. Now, some countries think about the northern countries, which have plenty of water and a lot of capacity for hydropower. They may relatively easily reach that goal. Other countries which are maybe less rich in water, less rich in wind, they may have much a harder time to meet that goal. Now, it really makes no sense to request anyone to reach that kind of goal at the same time, in the same way. The only relevant measure for your environmental performance is CO2 emissions. So you should leave member states to find their own way to cut CO2. You should not tell them how much to cut CO2 and also how to do that, because it can only generate extra costs and probably what the Americans call pork barrel legislation, that is vested interests capturing the regulatory process and trying to gain from a goal which should have to do just with the environment.
Do you agree with Carlo's description that the current EU legislation is overly prescriptive and that we could just set an overall framework for decarbonization and that's good enough? And
Yes.
if so, well, how would that look like?
Yes, I agree. And I agree also with what he previously mentioned, that it's always dangerous to have politicians, I'm sorry, but bureaucrats and politicians, or even economic professors, to pick a specific technology. Especially, we are the worst. So we shouldn't pick technologies. We shouldn't pick winners. We should have a way to discover which is the best way to achieve generally accepted goals. Because if we try to impose what to and how to, we will end up with a lot of an endless piece of regulation. And how can we solve this problem? We need a diversification. We need different sources. It's good. It happens with the diversification of portfolio in investment. This is the best strategy to cover your bets and to reduce the overall risk. But we don't have necessarily the same weight in our energy portfolio, as Carlo mentioned. Probably in Spain, it makes more sense to have more solar than here in Brussels, if I may.
The sun never shines in this city, I know.
Or in Germany. But if my information is correct, in Germany there are more solar panels than in Spain, or it used to be the case at some point. So what I'm trying to say is that we need diversification, not only at the country size, at the state member side, but also at the European level. And our diversification, for example, in Romania would be different of the diversification in Italy, which unfortunately outlawed nuclear energy at some point. And if we go with the example with Spain, Spain will put its energy sector in a huge danger, because when you have renewables which are dependent on how much sun, how much wind do you have, it fluctuates, and the natural fluctuations don't necessarily fit the fluctuations of consumption. So we need to correct this, to have something more than diversification. We need connections between different producers. So connectivity, it's a weapon in our, it's a defense weapon in our.
We will return to the issue of connectivity, but you have mentioned.
Just to add something, I fully agree, much agree with Carlo what he said, but I cannot agree that if it's cheaper to produce in another country, let's produce there. we don't take in consideration the cost of security. Maybe it's higher at the beginning, but as much as we produce more and more and more, the cost will be lower. And on long-term periods, the cost, it will be insignificant. Because look, we had that cost now in the gas that we buy from other market. If we would have long contract, for example, with Qatar, with Emirates, with other countries, United States, maybe we had at that time lower prices on a long-term period. But no, we buy from Russia, and when Russia rise the prices, we go. We fight all member states on the market, on the gas, and the prices will
So
go up.
sometimes there is a trade-off between affordability in the short term and energy
So we
security.
have to produce here, not only in Europe, but also in allied countries, that we are sure that want to use the technology as a weapon.
Let's talk about energy production domestically here in the EU then. You mentioned that decarbonization without nuclear power is not possible. That was also in a recent speech of yours. And
It's in my all speeches.
And so you certainly believe in it. And Radu also mentioned the importance of a base load when it comes to solar or wind. So when it comes specifically to small modular reactors across the European Union, we have talked about this for the last 10, 20 years, right? So it's not a new idea, but seems like the technology is slowly getting there. What can this house do specifically in order to help and standardize the process of building these small nuclear reactors? And can we actually, avoid this lengthy 10, 20-year-long constructions that we have seen in the UK, that we have seen in Italy, everywhere, pretty much. So is there something that the European Union can specifically do in order to help nuclear become much cheaper and much faster to build?
Look, small and modular reactors means standardization. When you talk about SMR, we talk about standardization from the beginning, that we standard the production of the SMR, and then we assemble it in different places. So each kind of SMR, even if it's French, but they don't have it, even it's an American, NuScale or Westinghouse Hitachi, which, by the way, are the only two that has a license now on the market, or maybe Chinese, I don't know, or Russian, I don't know, or Korean, they are standardized. So the problem is the supply chain, that we have to do it, and I think the problem that we have to solve it is the fuel, that we have to have the fuel inside Europe. For example, when I was minister, we chose in Romania to build 2 more CANDU reactors, the normal one, at Cernavoda, that we already have the technology, already have the fuel. And we choose, at that time was the only one, but Westinghouse, Hitachi, Rolls-Royce also contacted me, but we choose the NuScale technology. Why we choose NuScale technology? Because it's modular, but also because we can use the fuel from the NuScale in the CANDU reactor. So we can have everything inside, because we also produce and the fuel is produced by the French Framatome. So it's produced here in Europe. So when we talk about nuclear and we talk about SMR, doesn't matter if the technology is American, if the technology is French, or the technology is Korean. It's better if it's Chinese or Russian, we saw that. But we have to be sure that we can have our fuel. Because if you don't have the fuel, you just look at the reactor and cannot produce.
And what about the cost of building nuclear reactors?
Of course, the first of a kind, doesn't matter of technology, is more expensive than the other one. But we have to do these steps. I was in Canada with the ITRE committee last year, and we saw the Westinghouse Hitachi building. They told us when they want to build 12, and they make the whole business case on the whole 12. But the first one, of course, is more expensive. But when you think that you have to build 2, 3, 4, 5, you think from the whole picture. Not just build one and then we see what we'll do. This is not good.
So we build many reactors across the EU. Do we need a nuclear renaissance?
And you don't change the regulation.
Yeah, of course.
You don't change the regulation between the first and the second and the third and the 12th
If you change the regulation and you want more, you will have more costs.
I know you're a fan of technological neutrality, so
Yeah,
what's your
I'm
approach
also-
when it comes to nuclear energy? Can the EU and should the EU encourage certain types of technology, or how does technological neutrality looks?
Well, I think technological neutrality means in this context that you should treat nuclear the same way as renewable energies, because they deliver exactly the same, environmental benefit, that is decarbonized energy. Now, I'm against subsidizing energy. I would rather, tax CO2 than subsidizing clean energy. But if we decide we have to subsidize clean energy, we should subsidize it the same way, regardless of the source, as long as it is, equally clean. Then there is another point which is specific to nuclear power. As both MEP Popescu and Radu has said, regulation may substantially increase or decrease the costs of nuclear power depending on how it is designed. So we should find ways to use regulation to reduce the costs of nuclear power. And let me make just two examples. Example number one, I don't think it makes sense to have, different licensing processes at the level of member states. Yes. If a reactor is considered safe in Romania, it should be considered safe in Italy and vice versa. So, if we can agree that once a technology is accepted as safe at the European level, you don't need a further level of licensing at the national level.
Here it's a one-truth-free legislation that it's all over the world. But when you license a reactor in a country, you license a reactor on that site.
Yeah.
So that site may be different in other country from other sites. We don't license in a country a reactor about the technology of the reactor. It's about the reactor on the site.
Yes, but it may
How
change.
it perform on the site.
It may change with the small modular reactors, because SMRs are, in theory, at least in principle, the reason why you want to invest in SMRs is precisely that you can serialize the production in fabric rather than in the specific site. And the other thing is that it's obviously member states should, identify all the criteria for safety and security and environmental sustainability of nuclear reactors, but this should not become a weapon to make nuclear uncompetitive. There is an example that I think we should follow. That is, the British government a couple of years ago created a nuclear regulatory review by appointing a nuclear regulatory task force. And this task force produced a report with indicating a number of crazy regulation or requests. And one of the examples was that one of the main reasons why a reactor was eventually not authorized in Wales was that it was impossible to conclusively demonstrate that it would not interfere with some species of birds having their place there. So I understand, it's important to protect biodiversity. I'm not saying this should not be, we should not take care of this, but there should be a proportionality between the good you protect and what you give up for it. And especially, if there is maybe one, it's the only place in the world where that kind of birds can develop, okay, I can understand, save the birds. Otherwise, maybe you should balance. Again, it's an issue of trade-offs, exactly.
Indeed.
But let's tell to the people, because we don't want to relax regulation.
No, of course.
Safety first.
Yes.
So we cannot talk about nuclear if you don't talk about safety. So safety first, and then we can talk about everything.
Yes. No, I'm absolutely agree on
just
safety.
But just not to misunderstand when people look to us that we want to lower the regulation, but no, safety first.
Just like with airlines, it's the same with nuclear energy.
We don't want nuclear power plants like in Springfield, the Simpsons nuclear power plant, but at the same time, you want to agree on reasonable safety requests at the European level again, and also reasonable conditions which have not to do with safety, but which have to do with how a power plant or any other industrial plant interacts with the context and the environment where it is created.
I'm conscious that we only have 5 minutes left, and we are in a house where a lot of decisions get made when it comes to the regulatory simplification agenda. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the ongoing omnibus packages on energy and environmental matters, how you see them and how it can be improved, and how it can be implemented faster so it actually does lead to lower bills, to faster investment and a more reliable energy production.
Tomorrow in ITRE committee, Commissioner Jorgensen will come to present the grid package that was already launched. So without grid, as my colleague said, we cannot have lower prices. We cannot have a free market. Because I always said from the first time I came in European Parliament that we don't have an energy-free market. The energy don't flow free from the north to south to east to west because there are bottlenecks. And our region, our Eastern European region, the border of Ukraine, is the region with the highest prices. Why? Because the demand of energy is the highest because of Ukraine. Russia is bombing the energy system and they are buying from us, of course, it's normal. And because there are not a lot of grids between Austria and Slovakia, there's not connection, and Austria and Hungary not enough connections from the electricity to come. And there are, I think, 10 or 15 years in past when Austria didn't do that. So I agree that now with the grid connection, we have to have a planning of grid. So in that, if you said that's an omnibus, but we are waiting also for an omnibus, energy omnibus that to come this year from the Commission, but also we have to fasten the permitted. Because now if we want to build a transmission line, it will take us 5-7 years from permitting to construction. We don't have the time. So, because it's, as you said, maybe there are birds or maybe there are something else there.
Yes.
Maybe that's a restricted area, a natural park or so on. If it's a natural park and we have to have electricity here and there's no other place, we have to pass through that natural park. So we have to have some exception on an omnibus, on permitting, in order to fasten those permits. So enforcing the grid, enlarging the grid, and faster the grid, and digitalizing the grid.
I agree.
So better interconnectedness across Europe.
Yeah.
That's number 1 on your wish list. Radu, what's number 2 on your wish list?
It could be this one, because without this, nothing works. I would bet on accelerating whatever it takes to have at least one plant, wherever it can be, of small modular reactors in European Union. To have that one.
That one, it will be the first one in Europe, it will be in Romania.
Let's see that may happen. Carlo, what would be number 3 when it comes to your wish list?
My number 3 wish list would be to modify EU energy regulation in a way that allows me to me as a consumer to make a contract with a supplier cross-border. I mean, I can easily go online and buy stuff from Romania or from Germany and get whatever I buy shipped to my house with no problem whatsoever. But I cannot sign a contract with an energy supplier across the border.
Maybe you can sign, but I think the price is not good because you don't have enough connection to bring it in.
Well,
Everything comes back to connections.
well, that's why connections were priority number 1. My one was just number 3.
So everything comes down to good connections. And when it comes to the European competitiveness, everything comes down to good energy policy because that's the foundation of essentially all our industry in Europe. So you have heard a lot of different ideas how to improve our energy policy. And you're very welcome to share your own suggestions in the comments as well. But for now, a massive thank you for this conversation, gentlemen. I have really enjoyed it. I hope you have enjoyed it too. And if you did, don't forget to click subscribe and follow Epicenter on all our social media channels. Thank you very much for tuning in, and see you next month for a new conversation live from the European Parliament.